Hi everyone, been a while since I've put a video up, just been busy as per usual, but I'm just making this cabinet at the minute, and I'm about to make the cornice that goes around the top. Like if you're American, you might call it cove molding, we call it cornice on the cabinets, and it's basically just like a 40mm radius pencil round that runs around. It kind of echoes these cylindrical legs at the edge. It's got the curved corners. And the way I'm going to make it is to mitre up a frame, make it as a complete frame, and then route the profile around it. It's fairly simple, real basic stuff. But I'm going to use the Hoffmann MU2 dovetail key machine, which is like a small benchtop machine. And you know, a lot of people have probably seen these already, but if you haven't, it's just quite interesting, and it's a really versatile machine that doesn't take up a lot of space. And it is literally small enough that you could, you know, put it underneath your bench and bring it out when you need it. They come up used quite regular for about £1,000, something around that sort of mark. I don't know what they are new now, probably 2 or 3 grand, I guess. But I thought this might just be a good opportunity to show you how that works and what some of the nice features about being able to set it up. So what I'll do is I'll show you what we're about to make. I'll show you the machine, and we'll sort of run through how we do it. So this here is the frame that we're going to make the cornice out of, or cove mold out of, if you prefer. So all this is a bit of European oak, 30mm wide, 40mm deep. So that's like 1.25 by about, I don't know, 1.5 inches. And what we've got is mitred corners all the way around. You can hopefully see my pencil line there. See this radius drawn around the corner? That's roughly the round over. It's only just to give me a bit of an idea while I'm cutting my mitres how far in I want this joint to be. So you can see I've got a pencil mark here, and this is only approximate, but you can see that it's not halfway in the middle. It's offset back towards the back. And that's one of the nice things about the MU2. It's really quick to adjust whereabouts within this mitre the dovetail key is going to go. So obviously I want it kept back because I'm going to cut off the front of this when I round it around. And what I don't want to do is expose this joint, you know, in the corner. So what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at the MU2 machine. I'll do a couple of test cuts. I've got a couple of little scraps there to show you how it works. And then, yeah, we can kind of get this frame together, show you how it self-clamps. It means that you don't have to use any clamps on the frame, which is obviously beneficial, especially in harder woods like this. If it's something really soft like poplar or softwood, a coir maybe, I'd probably still stick a clamp on it just because the fibres crush a little bit rather than pulling the joint really tight. But if you've got something like oak or ash or just any hardwood beech, you know, if you're American, you might use maple. We don't use a lot of maple in the UK, but you might, you know, we use a bit, but not like they seem to over there. But any kind of, you know, dense hardwood, the self-clamping is really good. It's just on the softer woods, the fibres will crush rather than pull together. So we'll go have a look at the machine now and get these test cuts done. So this is the dovetail key machine itself. So this one's an MU2. There's lots of like MU3s which got bigger tables. I don't actually think this model's current anymore. I think they've probably replaced it with a newer version. But you know, apart from being a little bit updated, they function essentially the same way. So what you've got is you've got this handle on the top here, and as you pull this down, this pulls down this lever, which is like a clamp to hold your workpiece. And as that, this is self-adjusting essentially. So as that bottoms out on something, you then see, can you see up back there? There's this router cutter coming up, and it's a small dovetail router bit that comes up through. You can adjust the height that that cutter comes up by adjusting this stop. You know, and you can bring it up quite a long way actually. It's surprising how far it will go. But yeah, so that's really what you're doing. You're going to pull this router bit up through the wood vertically, creating a dovetail slot. And it works a little bit like, you know, same way like if someone put a bow tie in something, you know, the dovetail's a wedge and it pulls things together. Now, this one's got this set up here, which, because I use this for beaded face frames a lot. And what this does, this allows you beaded face frame use. But one of the nice things about the MU2 is just because you're set up for the beaded face frames, doesn't mean that you can't just use it as a standard mitre jointer as well still. So what we can do is we've got this plate here, and we've got a little Bristol lever that goes into the body here. And what you do is you slide this back or forward depending whereabouts you want that mitre to be on your unit. So what we can do is, let me grab these offcuts. Just be 1 second. So you can see when we push this offcut in, it's going to bottom out here. And the center of this is where the dovetail key's got to go. So by moving this further back, we essentially move the dovetail key further back into the piece. By moving it further forward, we move the dovetail key back forward into the piece. So really good and adjustable. And obviously, as you do one side, because this is a 90-degree angle here, as you do one side, you automatically do the other side, so they always match up. So it's a really good, quick way of getting very good, strong mitre joints. I wouldn't use it for anything structural, obviously, but for like, things like cornice, you can do it in the bottom of skirting, like base moulding. You can do it in all sorts, really. I've even used it on occasion for like reinforcing, like say I'm making up some mitred doors with like a profile around them. I use it for actually gluing and clamping up the mitred door and then put a spline in afterwards. So like it just works as a clamping aid because mitres are a pain to clamp up. So it's got a lot of good uses, and I say it's quite small and can be used for a lot of different things. So what I'll do now is I'll get this plugged in and get the extraction plugged into it. I don't have it permanently set up, it just has a little small like 2-inch size port for a hoover, and then we'll get this clamped together. So I'll just do that now. Right, so hopefully you can see fairly well there actually what that's, let's see if I can get this in focus, what that's cut there. Now you can see it's a dovetail slot. I mean, this length is adjustable. I've just done this to show you how it's going, but you can get various lengths of the keys depending on how thick a stock it is that you mitre in together. I'm just going to show you with one of these 18mm ones just as an example. But obviously, you'd normally have this glued first, but just to show you how it goes, this key is a small plastic built-in part, and it's got little ridges on it, like barbs. And the whole thing is angled so that as you tap it in, it's tapered so that the joint gets pulled further and further together the tighter it gets. So what we'll do now is we'll just tap this in here and you can sort of see how it works. So when we first get started, we're just going to line it up and then tap, 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 tap. And you can see that's done a pretty good job of putting that together. That's on the far side. Bearing in mind, you normally want to use a thicker one than this as well. But that's not a bad, not a bad mitre joint. So by the time that's glued, you've got this permanent fixing in there as well, which stays in. And what you can do is, I've in the past, if this is say the top of a cabinet, although it's not likely to be seen, I don't like people to see these plastic things. So I've made up some lengths of wood. If I'm using an 18mm key, I might set it in 24mm, and then I put a little 6mm plug over the top, a little 6mm wooden plug, which just, it looks quite nice as a feature, and it hides a little bit of plastic, which I don't really want on show. But yeah, hopefully that's kind of showing you roughly how that works. What I'm going to do now is go get this set up and we'll get this clamped up, this frame, and show you how you do a whole frame and glue it up properly. So we'll just speed through this process here because you've kind of already seen it, but we're just getting the components one at a time. I think I do this one, realise I haven't adjusted the depth and then have to readjust and recut these, but it's kind of shows you how good the alignment aids are, that you can adjust the depth, come back, cut it again, and everything just lines up perfectly. The slot isn't off-centered at all. Kind of works fine. So that's just getting these guys mitered up, and then the longer lengths can be a bit tricky. The MU3 has longer support tables, which is quite a good idea, and for me as well, that kind of gets in the way a little bit with the pocket hole machine, so I just shuffled that out of the way. But you could, if you wanted to do a lot of larger frames, it's probably worth having some kind of support rollers or support tables built in around it, or even just adjustable roller stands. Right, so we're all set up, ready to glue this together. I've just got these kind of loosely put where they're going to go. You can see we've got hopefully you can see those, they're the grooves going in. So because this is end grain, I'm going to use some polyurethane PU adhesive and get a little bit better adhesion. I mean, that's the other nice thing, like mitres are essentially an end grain joint, so they don't glue as well as, long grain to long grain. So having that mechanical fastening permanently in there is also a nice little help for the strength of the joint in the long term as well. Not that it's under a lot of strain on a cornice, but so we're going to Get them all slathered up with a bit of PU adhesive. This is this one I use. I really like this adhesive actually. It's called by a company called Bondit. It's called PU5. I prefer it to the stuff that comes in a bottle because it's a lot more viscous. You don't end up with so much mess with it, and it's relatively low foam. You don't get as much foaming out as what you do with, like, you know, your classic Gorilla Glue type PU glue. It's a relatively clean process to use it. So now that we've got those glued up, we can pop them in place. And what we're going to do is get some of these keys. These are the dovetail keys themselves. Now I'm using an 18.5mm long dovetail key, and I've done a 30mm deep slot because I'm going to push this down into the center with a punch, and then I'm also going to plug over the top of it with some wood so that you can't see it. I mean, it's right on the top of an 8-foot tall cabinet, so you're unlikely to anyway, but it's just a nice neater finish. So we're going to punch these down. Now, because I've got these offset so far back, I'm also going to use a couple of mitre clamps on the front. Now, I wouldn't normally, because you don't normally need it. And also I wouldn't want the pinholes in it. But given that these corners are being rounded off anyway, they're not actually going to show because they're going to be cut away. So we might as well pop a couple on there, just get a little bit of additional clamp force across the front of the joint. It's holding up tight with the dovetail keys anyway, but it's just more than anything for handling. As you put it around, you're less likely to open up the front of the joint while you're moving it about. And so I've got some brown paper down on my workbench here just to try and keep it a bit clean. I do some veneering and laminating on this workbench, so it's important to me that it stays quite clean so that it stays flat. What I don't want is ridges where there's lumps of glue and stuff being scraped off of it, so I try and make an effort to keep it fairly clean. Now let's get this other end done the same. So now they're glued up, I'm just going to stick my glue spreader in a little cup of thinners. These are Mitres thinners, really good for cleaning up PU glue. Grab a couple more of the keys. And just really more than anything, it makes doing glue ups with mitres quite stress free. Everything kind of self-aligns, everything pulls in, they can't slip like if you was traditionally. I know a lot of people like using band clamps for clamping up these kind of mitered joints, but I find them quite fiddly compared to this. And you've got to do all four corners simultaneously, essentially, whereas you can do one at a time here. So we've got all those punched in. Grab some more of these Collins spring clamps for the mitres on the corners. Try and avoid throwing them all on the floor. Let's just move that out of the way. They're just clamps to hold the brown paper on, but it's not going to matter now that the thing's on there weighing it down. And we'll get one there. One down the bottom there. You can do these without this tool just by doing them with your fingers, but they're quite tricky. It's a lot easier when you've got this little spreading tool. Right, so that's them all put together. Then I'll just grab a rag, a toothbrush with a little bit of thinners on it. We'll give these a little clean up on the top here. So there's minimal foam out with this glue, but you do get a little bit still. Some of it's just squeezed out, some of it's not even the foam expanding. And obviously there is kind of lateral slide in these, so if you go over the top of them and you can feel that there's any difference in the height, you can just tap them down. So there's another advantage of having a real nice flat workbench working with these, is it kind of helps self-align everything. And what I do now is I'll grab that off the tripod and show you how these joints look. And just see if I can undo this. Oh, I've done the wrong thing, but so hopefully let's just unlock the. You can see these are nicely pulled together. Bit of reinforcement in them as well. And you know, just a nice easy way of doing a nice accurate mitre. You kind of see there's a little bit of squeeze out, makes it harder to see, but nice and tight all the way down the full length of them. So hopefully that's interesting to someone. I say these MU2 machines are They're quite useful, quite versatile, to do a lot with them, particularly good if you're doing the face frames combined with the notching guillotine. But if you've got any questions about it at all, feel free to pop them below. Thanks very much.